2026 isn't just another year, it's the extinction event for the average business. The floor is rising so fast that what worked for you yesterday is going to leave you drowning today. Everyone's going through the same process and coming to the same conclusions. They're picking the same obvious answers, and they're putting them into the same templates with the same stock photos and the same fonts and the same colors and the same AI-generated content that everyone else is using. We're in an era where everyone has fast, cheap access to professional tools, which is great from lifting everyone from here to here. The bell curve used to look something like this, with most businesses being somewhere in the middle, some above average, some below average. Some people were really terrible over at this end, and some people were really great over at this end. And it used to be that if you could present yourself in an average professional way, you were actually doing really good and you were ahead of half of the market. Well, this whole graph has changed. Access to these tools has cut off the entire back half of this graph. So the average is now the bottom. Everyone can now be at least average. And the problem is that the business owners and founders and CEOs haven't mentally caught up with this change yet. They came from a world where average was pretty good. So when they see that they're at an average level of professionalism, they think, well, I'm doing pretty good. This is fine. But it's not fine anymore. That's the bottom. And you have an entire generation of business owners who grew up with the reality that if you could just fit in hard enough, if you could just be average enough, you could do well in business. There was a time when that was true, but this is not that time anymore. And that means we have an entire generation of business owners who are not only not prepared to do what they have to do to get their business to move forward, they're actively terrified of it. You're afraid of being wrong in public. You're afraid of someone saying something. You're afraid of being weird. You're afraid of looking different. You're afraid of what people might think. You're afraid that someone might not like it. And so you sand off every edge of your business. No opinions, no decisions, no strategy, no positioning, no stance, nothing remarkable, nothing weird, nothing different. But when you sand off all those edges, there's nothing for people to grab onto. When was the last time you saw a company in your industry that made you really think and feel something? When was the last time you thought, holy crap, these people get it? When was the last time something made you feel emotional? For most industries, probably never, because everyone's playing it safe. But you could be that brand to someone else. Playing it safe used to work. When there were only a few players in your market, being professional and reliable was enough. There was more demand than supply. So as long as you were pretty good, you pretty much had a business. When information was hard to find, just knowing things was enough to keep you in business. But now everyone's professional, everyone's reliable, everyone has information. The bar hasn't just been raised, it's been destroyed and rebuilt in a completely different location. But most business owners are still stuck in the old playbook, shooting for average. So why now? Why is this the tipping point? Well, three things are happening simultaneously that you can see for yourself. First, AI is getting better, it's getting more accessible, and people are actually learning how to use it. Things that used to take months now take days. Things that used to take hours now take seconds. Everyone now has immediate access to create average content. That's why the back half of this graph is gone. Second, your customers, your clients have an attention span that's more fragmented than it ever has been. Every single aspect of their lives is bombarded with demands on their attention. They have more options than they've ever had in history, and they have more distractions than they've ever had in history. They just don't have the capacity to care about your thing because it looks exactly like the last 20 things they looked at. If you're not clearly, immediately different, you're already forgotten. And third, people don't care about professional brands anymore. They don't care about companies. They're not interested. They don't want to follow companies on social media. They don't want to see what companies have to say. They don't want to follow blog posts from companies. People have gotten savvy to media and advertising, and they just don't trust companies anymore. If you're just an average company, they interpret that as you being part of this corporate dystopia that we all live in. And the weird thing is, you probably know this already. You know the point of marketing is to stand out and differentiate yourself from your competitors, but you're terrified to do it. You just keep sanding off those rough edges. Anything that might be distinctive or weird about yourself, you polish it off until it's not there anymore. And you know that there's something about your business. There's something about you that you're not letting out. You're afraid to let it be seen. There's some really sweet thing that you would specialize in if you weren't afraid of losing other business. Your expertise has probably given you some really clear, insightful, decisive opinions about your industry, but that's not what you talk about on LinkedIn because it seems weird. There's some way of doing business that you've always wanted to try, but you don't because it's not how things are done. That thing that you're suppressing, that's not even a strategic advantage. That's the baseline requirement for survival in this new future that we're talking about. But you're just sitting on all that because you were trained that professionalism means fitting in. So now you're successful, but exhausted. You're professional, but invisible. You're safe, but you're stuck. But let's talk about what happens when you reject average. You recognize that average is the new bottom. A prospective client looks at 10 different companies, but they only remember one. It's yours. Half the market looks at you and feels like you're not a good fit, but the other half of the market loves you and can't imagine working with anyone else. And your message is so clear and specific that they can't get it out of their brains and they remember to refer other people to you. And did I mention you can charge more? Of course you can charge more because you're not like everyone else. You're different. You're not competing on price because you don't have any competitors. You're in a category all your own. And before you say that won't work in my industry, that's what everyone says before someone comes along and does it. Of course it will work in your industry. It always works. So make a decision right now. Are you going to keep optimizing for average and fighting over scraps? Or are you going to build something so distinctive that your competition becomes irrelevant? Average is the new bottom. And if you're at the bottom, you're invisible. And the invisible businesses won't survive what's about to come.